When my mother passed, my father's house felt too quiet. Her voice still echoed in the walls, her laughter in the garden. I thought the silence would heal him. But one afternoon, my fiancée looked around his living room and said he should sell this old place. It's too big for one person. I didn't say anything. I just watched my father smile politely and thought to myself, Sophie has no idea what she's getting into. People think loss makes you weak. That grief turns you into someone who can't think straight, who needs to be managed and guided like a child. But I learned something different watching my father after Mom died. Loss taught him how to wait, how to watch, how to see what people really wanted when they thought he was too broken to notice. Sophie stood in the doorway of Dad's kitchen that day, her manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. She wore white jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than Dad's monthly grocery bill. Everything about her was polished, perfect, calculated. "I'm just thinking about what's best for Wilson," she said, her voice dripping with concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "William and I worry about him being out here all alone. And honestly, the market is so hot right now, he could make a fortune." I watched Dad look around the kitchen. Mom's ceramic rooster collection lined the windowsill above the sink. Her handwriting was still visible on the recipe cards tucked into the cookbook holder. The morning light hit the counter exactly the way it had for 37 years, illuminating the spot where she used to roll out pie dough every Sunday. "I appreciate your concern," Dad said quietly, "but I'm not ready to make any decisions yet." Sophie's smile tightened. Just a fraction. Just enough for me to see, and I'm sure Dad saw it too. "Of course," she said. "Take your time. But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't last forever." She left with me shortly after, and I could feel the weight of what had just happened. In the car, Sophie immediately started talking about property values and investment opportunities, but all I could think about was the look on my father's face. That patient, knowing look that Mom used to get when someone at church said something particularly foolish. I should have seen it then. I should have recognized what Sophie was really after. But love makes you blind sometimes. Or maybe I just didn't want to see. My mother, Margaret, died on a Tuesday in April. The dogwoods were blooming, and she spent the morning working in the garden despite the pain. She always said she wanted to die with dirt under her fingernails, and in a way, she got her wish. The doctor said it was her heart. Too much strain, too much damage over the years. But I knew better. Mom's heart was the strongest thing about her. It was everything else that finally gave out. The funeral was simple, the way she wanted it. White lilies and hymns she'd picked out herself years ago. I held Dad's hand during the service, and I saw him crying silently, his shoulders shaking. The man who'd always been my rock was crumbling, and I didn't know how to fix it. Sophie sat beside me with her phone in her lap, checking messages during the eulogy. I saw it. I should have said something, but I didn't. The first month after Mom passed was the hardest for all of us. Dad's house felt enormous without her. I'd call him in the evenings, and I could hear the loneliness in his voice, even when he said he was fine. Friends from church brought casseroles and condolences. They told him to take his time, to grieve at his own pace. I watched him nod and thank them, and eat their tuna noodle bakes alone at the kitchen table. I called every few days. "How are you holding up, Dad?" I'd ask. He'd tell me he was fine, and we'd talk about the weather or my job or nothing at all. The conversations felt hollow, like we were both just going through the motions. I'd been dating Sophie for 3 months when I first brought her to Dad's house. It was 6 weeks after the funeral, and Dad still hadn't moved Mom's slippers from beside the bed. Sophie took one look around, and I saw her mentally cataloging everything. The outdated wallpaper in the dining room, the worn carpet on the stairs, the china cabinet full of plates we only use on holidays. "This is charming," she said, but the way she said it made it sound like an insult dressed up as a compliment. Very retro. I laughed nervously. Dad likes keeping things the way Mom had them. "Of course," Sophie said, touching my arm. "That's sweet," but her eyes were already calculating. I could see the wheels turn behind that pretty smile. She was adding up square footage and lot value, subtracting repair costs and renovation budgets. She was seeing dollar signs where Dad saw memories. Over dinner that night, she asked careful questions. How long had they lived there? Had they paid off the mortgage? What were the property taxes like? Dad answered politely, giving her just enough information to be courteous, but not enough to be useful. You must have so many wonderful memories here, she said, cutting her chicken into precise, identical pieces. But don't you think it might be easier to start fresh somewhere smaller? Somewhere with less upkeep? I manage fine, Dad said. I'm sure you do. She smiled that tight smile. I'm just thinking long term. You're not getting any younger, and William worries about you out here all alone. I looked up from my plate, surprised. I do. Sophie shot me a look. Of course you do, honey. We both do. I watched this exchange with growing discomfort. This was how it started. Then, the small suggestions, the planted seeds of doubt, the gentle pressure disguised as concern. After we left that night, Sophie started talking about how impractical it was for Dad to stay in that big house, how he could make so much money selling it, how we could help him find a nice condo somewhere closer to us. Don't you think it would be better for him? She asked. I don't know. I said honestly. That house is full of memories of Mom. I'm not sure he's ready to leave that behind. William, he's living in the past. We need to help him move forward. Something about the way she said we made me uncomfortable, like she was already part of decisions that should have been between my father and me. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded and changed the subject. Over the next 2 months, Sophie and I visited Dad more frequently. She'd always suggest it, always frame it as being helpful and supportive. We'd show up on Saturday mornings with coffee and pastries, all smiles and helpfulness. But there was always an agenda underneath. We were thinking, Sophie would say, settling onto the couch with her latte, maybe we could help you start going through Margaret's things. You know, just to make it easier when you're ready to downsize. Downsize. That was her favorite word. She used it like it was inevitable, like it was just a matter of time before Dad gave into the obvious wisdom of her plan. I'm not ready for that yet, Dad would say. Of course not, she'd reply, her voice syrupy with false sympathy. But maybe we could just start small. Like, do you really need all these knickknacks? Some of them might be worth something. We could sell them online. The knickknacks, she was referring to her mom's collection of ceramic birds. She'd started collecting them on my parents' honeymoon in Vermont and had added to the collection every anniversary. Each one had a story. Each one was a memory made tangible. Those aren't for sale, Dad said quietly. Sophie's smile never wavered. Okay, just trying to help. But I noticed that the next time we visited, one of the birds was missing. A small blue jay Mom had bought at a craft fair in Asheville. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe Dad had moved it or packed it away. But then other things started disappearing too. Small things. A silver picture frame that had sat on the mantel. A set of vintage cufflinks that had belonged to my grandfather. An antique clock that Mom had inherited from her grandmother. Each time something vanished, Sophie would mention how cluttered the house looked, how overwhelming it must be for Dad to keep track of everything. And I'd nod along, increasingly uncomfortable but unwilling to contradict her. I was changing, and I didn't even realize it. The son who used to stand up for what was right was now letting his fiancée manipulate his own father. And Dad saw it. I know he did, but he never said anything. He just watched and waited with that patient expression Mom used to have. One evening, Sophie and I invited Dad to our apartment for dinner. It was a modern place downtown, all glass and chrome and furniture that looked uncomfortable to actually sit on. Sophie had made salmon and quinoa, and some kind of kale salad that tasted like punishment. We wanted to talk to you about something, I said halfway through the meal, glancing at Sophie for support. We've been looking at the numbers, Sophie jumped in, pulling out her phone. And if you sold the house in the next month, you could easily clear $400,000, maybe more. William and I have been talking, and we think the smart move would be to invest that money in a retirement community. There's a beautiful place just 20 minutes from us. They have activities and meal plans and medical staff on site. You've been looking at retirement homes for me, Dad said. It wasn't a question. Just exploring options, Sophie said brightly. The waiting lists of the good ones are really long. So if you're interested, we'd need to move fast. Dad set down his fork carefully. I appreciate your concern, but I'm 72, not 92. I'm in good health. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself, and I have no intention of moving into a retirement community. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Dad, I said carefully, we're just trying to think about your future, about what's best for you. What's best for me, Dad repeated slowly, is staying in a home I built with your mother, the home where you grew up, the home that's filled with every memory that matters to me. Sophie's mask slipped for just a second. I saw annoyance flash across her face before she caught herself and rearranged her features into concern. Wilson, I understand this is emotional for you, but you have to think practically. That house is too big, too old, and frankly, it's becoming a burden. What if you fall? What if something breaks and you can't fix it? What if I live my own life and make my own decisions? Dad said quietly. Silence. I looked at my father, really looked at him. He'd lost weight. There were dark circles under his eyes. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. And here I was, pressuring him to give up the last piece of mom he had left. We're just trying to help, Sophie said, her voice colder now. But if you want to be stubborn about it, that's your choice. Just remember that when you're ready to be reasonable, we'll still be here. The dinner ended shortly after. I drove Dad home in uncomfortable silence. When we pulled into the driveway, he finally spoke. William, do you want me to sell the house? I was quiet for a long moment. I want you to be happy, I finally said. And if staying in that big house alone makes you happy, then that's what matters. But, he prompted, but Sophie thinks. I didn't ask what Sophie thinks. I asked what you think. I gripped the steering wheel. I think maybe she has a point about it being a lot for you to manage. And I think maybe I'd worry less if you were somewhere with people around. It was honest, at least. I'll think about what you said. Dad told me. But I need you to understand something. Your mother and I spent our whole lives building something in that house. Not just a physical building, but a home. A place where love lived. And I'm not ready to let that go just because it's convenient for someone else. I nodded slowly. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for caring about me, he said. Just remember that caring about someone means respecting their choices, even when you don't agree with them. After he went inside, I sat in the car for a while, thinking about what he'd said, about what Sophie had said, about whose opinion really mattered. Over the next few weeks, Sophie's campaign intensified. She started showing me listings for condos and retirement communities, leaving glossy brochures around our apartment. She'd talk about how much easier Dad's life would be, how much money he could make, how we could use some of that money to help with our wedding. That last part should have been a red flag, but I was too deep in it to see clearly. Then one day, Sophie suggested we invite Dad over with a realtor, just to get a sense of the property value, she said, so we know what we're working with. I hesitated, but she kept pushing, and eventually I agreed. I called Dad and asked if we could come by that Saturday. With a realtor, I added awkwardly, just to, get an estimate. There was a long pause. All right, William, come by around 2. Something in his voice made me nervous, but I couldn't put my finger on what. That Saturday, Sophie dressed like she was going to a business meeting. Sharp blazer, high heels, leather portfolio. The realtor was a woman in her 50s named Diane, professional and efficient. When we arrived, Dad was waiting on the porch. He looked calm, almost peaceful. He greeted us warmly, made coffee, and let us walk through the house with Diane. Sophie followed closely, already mentally redecorating. I trailed behind, looking at all the memories. My childhood bedroom. The kitchen where Mom taught me to make pancakes. The living room where we'd open presents every Christmas morning. What was I doing? Why was I pushing Dad to give this up? When we returned to the living room, Dad invited everyone to sit. He served the coffee carefully, taking his time, and then he placed a manila envelope on the coffee table. Before we talk about next steps, he said, there's something I need to show you. Sophie reached for the envelope eagerly. What's this? The papers I've been working on. The plans I've made. She opened it and pulled out the documents. I watched her face as she read. Watched the confusion turn to comprehension, turn to shock. You gave it away? Her voice came out strangled. My heart stopped. Dad, what is she talking about? Dad looked at me calmly. I transferred ownership to a charitable foundation, the Margaret Pierce Foundation for Homeless Families. I retain a lifetime living right, which means I can stay here as long as I want. But the house itself now belongs to the foundation. I stared at the papers Sophie was holding, trying to process what I was hearing. When I'm gone, Dad continued, the house will be sold, and the money will go to funding transitional housing for homeless families. People who just need a little help to get back on their feet. Your mother always wanted to do more for the shelter where she volunteered. Sophie had gone pale. This is insane. You can't just give away our... She caught herself, but not quickly enough. Your what? Dad asked quietly. She stood up abruptly. Our inheritance. That's William's inheritance. You had no right to... I had every right. Dad said, his voice still calm. It was my house. My decision. And contrary to what you seem to believe, Sophie, I don't owe you anything. William, tell him. Sophie turned to me desperately. Tell him he can't do this. But I was staring at the wedding photo on the coffee table. The one of Mom and Dad on their wedding day, young and hopeful and so in love. And suddenly, everything became clear. Mom always wanted to help people. I heard myself say, she volunteered at that shelter for years. That's not the point. Sophie's composure was completely shattered now. The point is that he's throwing away hundreds of thousands of dollars that should go to his family. Should go to you, you mean? Dad said. She turned to him, and I saw her without the mask for the first time. She was furious, entitled, greedy. You're a foolish old man, she hissed. That house was your son's future, his security, and you just threw it away on strangers. Sophie, I stood up horrified, but Dad just smiled sadly. There it is, the truth we've been dancing around for months. You never cared about what was best for me, Sophie. You only cared about what you could get out of me. She grabbed her purse, shaking with rage. I'm done with this. With you. Come on, William. We're leaving. But I didn't move. I was still looking at my mother's photo, at Dad's patient face, at the truth I'd been too blind to see. William. Sophie's voice was sharp. Let's go. You should leave, I said quietly. I need to talk to my dad. Alone. Are you serious right now? Yes. Please leave. For a moment, I thought Sophie might explode. But then she seemed to realize she'd lost. She shot Dad one final look of pure hatred, grabbed her things and stormed out. The realtor, who'd been watching this whole scene unfold with wide eyes, mumbled an apology and hurried after her. The door slammed. The house fell silent. Dad and I sat there, not speaking. I could hear the old clock ticking in the hallway, the one Mom wound every Sunday, the one Sophie had tried to steal. Finally I spoke. I'm sorry, Dad. For what? For not seeing it sooner. For letting her push you. I rubbed my face. For forgetting what Mom taught me. Dad reached over and put his hand on my shoulder. You didn't forget, son. You just got a little lost. It happens to the best of us. She's been stealing from you, I said. The things that went missing. That was her, wasn't it? Dad nodded. I suspected, and I didn't stop her. I didn't even notice. I laughed bitterly. What kind of son does that make me? The human kind. The kind who wanted to believe the best in someone he cared about. He paused. But William, you need to think carefully about whether this is the person you want to build a life with. Because the way someone treats your family when they think there's money involved tells you everything you need to know about their character. I was quiet for a long time. I know. I think I've known for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. That's okay. You get to make that decision on your own time. I looked at him with tears in my eyes. Was Mom really planning this? The foundation? Not specifically. But she always said that if we were blessed with more than we needed, we should share it with people who needed it most. This felt like the right way to honor that. "It's perfect," I said, my voice breaking. "It's exactly what she would have wanted." We sat together in the silence, and for the first time in months, it felt like I could breathe again. Like maybe I'd finally found my way back to what mattered. The next few weeks were difficult. I broke things off with Sophie. She didn't take it well. There were angry texts, dramatic voicemails, threats to sue for the time she'd wasted. But eventually, she moved on to someone else, some other target she could manipulate. And I started coming by Dad's house more often. We didn't always talk about what had happened. Sometimes we just sat on the porch, drinking coffee and watching the seasons change. But slowly, I felt myself coming back. The real me, not the version Sophie had been trying to create. One Saturday afternoon, I helped Dad plant tulip bulbs in Mom's garden. She'd always loved tulips, the bright ones that looked like cups of sunshine. I forgot how much I loved this place. I said, my hands covered in dirt. "When I was a kid, I used to think our house was magic." "What made you think that?" "Because it was the only place where everything felt right, where I felt safe, where I knew Mom and Dad would always be there when I needed them." I paused. I took that for granted. We all take things for granted sometimes. The important thing is recognizing it and doing better. I nodded, pressing a bulb gently into the soil. "Tell me about the foundation. How's it working?" Dad smiled. "Linda Chun, that attorney friend of your Mom's, has been helping me set everything up. We've already started raising additional funds. The goal is to have the first transitional house ready within 2 years. It'll provide temporary housing for families, 6 months to a year, while they get back on their feet. Job training, financial counseling, childcare support. Everything they need to break the cycle." "Mom will be so proud," I said softly. "I hope so. But more than that, I hope it actually helps people." That's what she cared about most. Making a real difference in real lives. Over the following months, word got out about the foundation. People who'd known Mom started contributing. Her old friends from the shelter, people from church, even some folks who'd never met her but just heard about what we were trying to do. The local newspaper ran a story. "Widower honors late wife's memory by creating foundation for homeless families." They interviewed Dad and several people who'd known Mom. The article captured her kindness, her tireless volunteer work, her genuine care for people society had forgotten. And I started volunteering too. At first, it was just a way to feel closer to Mom, to honor her memory. But then it became something more. I met the families the foundation was helping. I heard their stories. I saw their resilience and their hope. One day, about 6 months after everything happened, I met someone at the shelter. Her name was Rachel, and she was a teacher at the elementary school where Mom had volunteered as a reading tutor. "I actually met your mom," Rachel told me. "She came to my classroom every Tuesday for 3 years. The kids loved her. She loved them," I said. "She always said teaching children to read was one of the most important things a person could do." Rachel smiled. She was right. I became a teacher because of volunteers like her. People who showed me that education matters, that every kid deserves someone who believes in them. We talked for hours that day. About Mom, about teaching, about the foundation, and what it meant. And for the first time since Mom died, I felt hopeful about the future. Rachel and I started dating a few months later. I was careful this time. I watched how she treated Dad, how she talked about Mom, how she engaged with the foundation's work. Everything about her was genuine, real, kind. When I brought her to meet Dad officially, he hugged her and said, "Your mother would have loved her." And I knew he was right. That was 3 years ago. Rachel and I got married in Dad's backyard, under the old oak tree where my parents had been married 38 years earlier. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and family. Rachel wore a simple dress and carried wildflowers. I cried when I saw her coming down the makeshift aisle. Dad stood beside me as my best man, and when the minister asked who gave this woman to be married, Rachel's father stepped forward. But I reached for Dad's hand too, and in that moment, I felt Mom there with us. In the sunshine, in the breeze, in the love that filled that space. At the reception, I gave a speech. I talked about my mother, about the lessons she'd taught me, about how I'd lost my way for a while, but found it again. "My dad showed me something important," I said, looking at him across the crowd. "He showed me that the best way to honor someone you love isn't to cling to what they left behind. It's to carry forward what they believed in." Mom believed in helping people, in being kind even when it's hard, in choosing what's right over what's easy. I paused, my voice catching. And because of that, because of the foundation Dad created in her name, dozens of families are going to get the help they need. That's Mom's real legacy. Not a house or money or things, but love in action. People applauded. I saw tears on many faces, and I saw Dad wiping his eyes. Now, Rachel and I have a daughter. We named her Margaret after my mom. She's 3 years old now, bright and curious, with her grandmother's kind eyes and infectious laugh. Every time I look at her, I see Mom's spirit living on, that same gentle warmth that made everyone feel loved and valued. Dad is 82 now. He still lives in that house, still tends Mom's garden with the same devotion she did. He still oversees a foundation that bears her name, though Rachel and I have taken on more of the daily operations. His hands shake a little more than they used to, and he needs a cane to get around, but his mind is as sharp as ever. Every Sunday, we bring little Maggie to visit, and she runs straight to him, climbing into his lap for stories about her grandmother. The Margaret Pierce Foundation is in its 10th year now. We've helped over 300 families, 300 second chances, 300 new beginnings. I remember the first family that moved into our inaugural transitional home. A young mother named Jessica with 3 kids, escaping an abusive situation. She had a job lined up at the hospital, but needed childcare and time to save for a deposit. The foundation gave her that chance, that safety, that breathing room to rebuild. I met Jessica on move-in day. Her oldest daughter, Emma, was 7 years old with shy eyes and a grip on her mother's hand that wouldn't let go. "Thank you," Jessica said to Dad and me, tears streaming down her face. "You have no idea what this means to us." But we did know, because Mom had told us stories from the shelter for years. Stories of families just like Jessica's, people who weren't lazy or irresponsible, just unlucky. One bad relationship, one medical emergency, one lost job, and suddenly the safety net was gone. 2 years later, Jessica graduated from her nursing program. She came to visit Dad with photos of her family in their own apartment, modest, but theirs. She brought a donation of $100 for the foundation. "It's not much," she said, "but I wanted to give back, to help the next family, the way you helped us." Dad took the envelope with tears in his eyes. "Margaret will be so proud of you, not because you're giving money back, but because you didn't give up, because you fought for your kids." That's what the foundation does. It doesn't just provide housing. It provides hope, dignity, a reminder that everyone deserves a second chance. We've seen veterans get back on their feet, connect with VA services, find steady work. We've seen immigrant families rebuild after their small businesses failed, learn new skills, start fresh. We've seen teenagers aging out of foster care get mentorship, enroll in community college, plan for futures they never thought possible. Each story is different. Each person has their own struggles, their own dreams, their own resilience. But they all have one thing in common. They needed someone to believe in them, to give them a chance, to see their potential instead of their problems. That's what Mom always did. That's what the foundation does in her name. Sometimes I think about Sophie. I wonder if she ever heard about the foundation, if she ever realized what she lost by trying to take what wasn't hers. But it doesn't matter anymore. She's just a footnote in this story, a catalyst, the person who accidentally pushed us toward our purpose. In the end, her greed created generosity. Her selfishness sparked selflessness. Her attempt to destroy something beautiful ended up creating something even more beautiful. Without her pressure, Dad might not have thought to create the foundation. He might have just lived out his days in that house, comfortable but without this deeper purpose. Sophie's manipulation inadvertently pushed him, pushed all of us, towards something far more meaningful than any of us could have imagined. Last week, Rachel and I took little Maggie to visit Dad. We sat on the porch, watching her chase butterflies in Mom's garden, and Dad told me something I'll never forget. "You know, William," he said, "when Sophie tried to pressure me into selling this house, I was angry at first, but now I'm grateful." "Grateful?" I asked, surprised, because her greed forced me to think about what really mattered, about what legacy I wanted to leave. "And it brought you back to yourself, back to the values your mother and I tried to teach you." He paused, watching Maggie play. "Sometimes the worst moments in our lives push us toward our greatest purpose. Your mother's death broke my heart. Sophie's manipulation hurt both of us. But from that pain came healing, not just for us, but for hundreds of families who needed someone to believe in them." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Mom will be so proud of you, Dad, of what you built." "We built it together," he said. "Your mother and I, and now you and Rachel are carrying it forward. That's all I ever wanted. For the love to keep spreading, generation after generation." Little Maggie ran up to us then, holding a yellow tulip she'd picked from the garden. "For Grandpa Wilson," she said, handing it to Dad with a big smile that was pure Margaret. Dad took the flower gently, his eyes filling with tears. "Thank you, sweetheart. You know, your grandmother Margaret loved tulips." "Daddy told me," Maggie said, climbing into his lap. "She planted them so we'd always remember her." And in that moment, sitting on that porch with 3 generations of our family together, I understood what Dad had been trying to teach me all along. Love isn't about holding on. It's about passing something forward. Mom taught us that through her years of volunteering, her quiet acts of kindness, her belief that everyone deserves compassion. Dad lived it by creating the foundation, by choosing purpose over comfort, by turning grief into action. And now Rachel and I get to share it with everyone who needs to be reminded that they matter, that they have value, that someone believes in them. The foundation continues to grow. We're opening our 7th transitional home next month, this one specifically designed for families with young children. Dad still attends every board meeting, though he jokes that he's training Rachel and me to take over. "I'm not going anywhere yet," he says with that patient smile. "But when I do, I need to know this will continue." And it will, because it's not just Dad's legacy or Mom's legacy anymore. It's become part of who we are as a family. Little Maggie already talks about helping people when she grows up. She doesn't fully understand a foundation yet, but she understands kindness. She understands that some people need help and that we have the ability to give it. Last month, we held a ceremony at the main transitional home for the Foundation's 10th anniversary. Families who've been helped by the program came back to share their stories. Jessica was there with her 3 kids, all thriving now. Marcus, a veteran who'd struggled with PTSD and homelessness, came with his new wife. The Rodriguez family brought their daughter, who was graduating from high school with a scholarship. Sarah, who'd aged out of foster care, was finishing her bachelor's degree in social work. Each person stood up and talked about what the foundation meant to them. Not just the housing or the resources, but the dignity, the belief, the second chance. And each time someone spoke, I saw Dad's eyes fill with tears. Not sad tears, but tears of fulfillment, of purpose, of knowing that Mom's love was still spreading, still touching lives, still making a difference. When it was Dad's turn to speak, he stood slowly, leaning on his cane, and looked out at all those faces, all those lives that had been changed. "My wife never wanted to be famous," he began, his voice steady despite his emotion. "She never sought recognition or praise. She just wanted to help. Quietly, consistently, without fanfare. That's who she was." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When she died, I was lost. The house we'd built together felt empty. I couldn't imagine how to go on without her. And then someone suggested I sell the house, turn into money, move on with my life, as if 40 years of love and memories could just be converted into a bank account." A few people chuckled, knowing the story. It had become part of the Foundation's history, the catalyst that started everything. But I couldn't do it, not because I was sentimental, though I was, but because I knew Margaret wouldn't want me to just preserve the past. She wanted me to build on it, to take what we had and turn it into something that could help others. He looked at me, then at Rachel holding Maggie. "So I gave the house to you. Not to you specifically, but to all of you, to everyone who needs a safe place to rebuild, a second chance, a reminder that they matter. That's what this foundation is. It's Margaret's love made tangible. And as long as it exists, as long as it helps even one person, she lives on. The applause was thunderous. People stood. Some cried. And I felt Mom there as clearly as if she were standing beside us, her hand in Dad's, both of them watching their dream come to life. After the ceremony, Dad and I walked through the house slowly. He pointed out details, told me stories about the families who'd stayed there, shared his hopes for the future. When I'm gone, he said quietly, this house will be sold like we planned, and the money will help even more families. But until then, I want to see every life we touch, every family we help, every second chance we give. You're going to be around for a long time, Dad. I said. He smiled. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, I'm at peace. I've done what Margaret and I set out to do. We've made a difference. We've spread love. We've shown people that compassion matters more than money. We stood in the doorway, looking out at the garden where several children were playing, their laughter filling the air. That's the sound Margaret loved most. Dad said, children laughing, families healing, hope being reborn. I put my arm around his shoulders, feeling how frail he'd become, but also how strong his spirit remained. She'd be so proud of you, Dad, of everything you've built. We built it together, he said again. Even after she was gone, she was still guiding me. Through her journals, her recordings, her example. She left me a roadmap, and all I had to do was follow it. That night, after we'd taken Dad home and put Maggie to bed, Rachel and I sat on our own porch, talking about the day. Your father is an incredible man, she said. Not many people would have had the wisdom to do what he did. He learned it from Mom. I said, she was always the wise one, always seeing the bigger picture, the longer view. Dad just had the courage to act on it. And you had the courage to choose the right path, Rachel said, taking my hand. Even when it meant losing Sophie. Even when it meant admitting you were wrong. I thought about that. About how close I'd come to pushing Dad into selling the house. About how easily I'd been manipulated by Sophie's charm and her careful words. About how I'd almost betrayed everything my parents had taught me about what really matters in life. I was so blind, I said. So focused on what Sophie said made sense that I forgot to ask whether it was right. But you found your way back, Rachel said. That's what matters. Your dad gave you space to make that choice yourself, and you made it. She was right. Dad never forced me to see the truth about Sophie. He never told me what to do or how to think. He just quietly went about creating something beautiful, something meaningful, and trusted that I would eventually understand. That patience, that faith in me, was perhaps his greatest gift. The foundation has become more than just a charity. It's become a community. Families who graduated from the program often come back to volunteer, to mentor new families, to give back what they received. We've created partnerships with local businesses for job training, with schools for educational support, with hospitals for healthcare access. Mom's simple dream of helping homeless families has blossomed into a comprehensive support system that addresses the root causes of homelessness, not just the symptoms. I think about the lives we've touched. The single mother who's now a registered nurse, the veteran who found purpose again, the immigrant family who rebuilt their business, the foster youth who's now helping other kids in the system. Each one of them represents not just a success story, but a ripple effect. Because when you help one person, you help their children, their future grandchildren, everyone they'll ever touch with their own kindness. That's what Mom understood. That's what Dad honored. And that's what I'm learning to carry forward. A few months ago, we received a letter at the foundation. It was from a man named David, who'd stayed in one of our homes 7 years earlier after losing his job in his apartment. He wrote about how the foundation had given him the stability to get back on his feet, find new work, rebuild his savings. But more than that, he wrote about the dignity he'd felt, about how the staff and volunteers had treated him like a person, not a problem, like someone with value, not someone to be pitied. I want you to know, he wrote, that the Margaret Pierce Foundation didn't just give me a place to stay. It gave me back my humanity. It reminded me that my circumstances didn't define me. And now, 10 years later, I own my own small business, and I'm able to give back to my community. I volunteer at a homeless shelter in my city, and I try to treat every person I meet the way your foundation treated me, with respect, with dignity, with hope. Dad cried when I read him that letter. That's it, he said. That's exactly what Margaret wanted. Not just to help people survive, but to help them remember their own worth, to help them see that they matter. I keep that letter in my office now, along with dozens of others like it. On hard days, when the foundation faces funding challenges or bureaucratic obstacles, I read those letters. I remember why we do this work. I remember that every dollar raised, every policy fought for, every hour volunteered represents a real person with a real story and a real chance at a better life. Little Maggie is starting to understand more about her grandmother's legacy. Last week, she came with us to the foundation for a volunteer day. She helped in the children's play area, reading books to kids who are living through one of the hardest times in their young lives. Watching her, I saw a mom's spirit so clearly. The same gentle patience, the same genuine interest in each child, the same ability to make everyone feel special and seen. After we left, Maggie asked me, "Daddy, why don't those kids have their own houses?" I knelt down to her level. Sometimes grown-ups go through hard times. Sweetheart, they might lose their jobs or get sick or have other problems. And when that happens, they need help. That's what Grandma Margaret always wanted to do. Help people when they needed it most. Like Grandpa Wilson did with the house? She asked. Exactly like that. Grandpa could have sold the house and kept all the money, but instead, he gave it away so it could help lots of families. That's what love does, Maggie. It doesn't hold on tight. It passes things forward. She thought about that for a moment. When I grow up, I want to help people too. You already are, sweetheart. Every time you're kind to someone, every time you share, every time you make someone smile, you're helping, just like Grandma Margaret did. That conversation reminded me of something Mom used to say. You don't have to do big things to make a difference. You just have to do small things with great love. She lived that every day, in every interaction, with every person she met. And somehow, all those small acts of love added up to a legacy that's still growing, still spreading, still changing lives. Dad's health has been declining slowly. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual wearing down that comes with age. He gets tired more easily now, takes longer to recover from minor illnesses, moves more carefully through his days. But his spirit remains strong. His mind stays sharp. And his commitment to the foundation never wavers. Last month, he told me something that stayed with me. We were sitting in his living room, the same room where Sophie had once stood calculating property values. And he said, "William, I need you to promise me something." "Anything, Dad." "When I'm gone and this house is sold, and the money goes to the foundation, I want you to remember why we did this. Not to spite Sophie, though that was a nice bonus." He smiled slightly, but because it was right. Because your mother believed in helping people, and this was the best way to honor that belief. I'll remember, Dad, I promise. And teach Maggie. Make sure she understands that wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch. That success isn't about what you accumulate, but what you give away. That love multiplies when you share it, but diminishes when you hoard it. I will. Rachel, and I talk about this all the time. We want Maggie to grow up understanding what really matters. He nodded, satisfied. Good, because that's the real inheritance I'm leaving you. Not money or property, but wisdom. The wisdom to know that the best life is a life spent serving others. The wisdom to choose compassion over convenience, generosity over greed, love over fear. I took his hand, feeling the tremor in his fingers, the papery texture of his skin. This man who'd been my hero, my rock, my guide, was getting older. One day, he wouldn't be here anymore. But his legacy, like Mom's, would live on, not in buildings or bank accounts, but in the lives we'd touched, the families we'd helped, the love we'd spread. Thank you, Dad. I said, my voice thick, for everything. for showing me what real strength looks like, for having the patience to let me find my own way, for honoring Mom in the most perfect way possible. Your mother was a strong one, he said. I just followed her example. You both were, I said. You both are. We sat together in comfortable silence, and I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From Mom's death to Sophie's manipulation, to Dad's quiet resistance to the Foundation's creation to this moment. Sitting in the living room of a house that no longer belonged to him legally, but would always be his home spiritually. The Foundation's impact continues to grow. We've been contacted by other cities wanting to replicate our model. We've been featured in national publications highlighting innovative approaches to homelessness. We've received grants from major philanthropic organizations. But the best recognition, the kind Dad and Mom would have valued most, comes from the families themselves. From the thank you notes and the visits and the stories of lives rebuilt and hope restored. Every year on the anniversary of Mom's death, we hold a memorial service at the main transitional home. It's become a tradition, a way of remembering her and celebrating her legacy. People come from all over, families we've helped, volunteers who've served, donors who contributed. We share stories about Mom, about her kindness and humor, and unwavering belief in human dignity. This year, for the 10th anniversary of her death, the service was especially meaningful. Dad spoke about meeting Mom, about their life together, about the values they tried to instill in me. He spoke about her volunteer work at the shelter, about how she'd come home with stories that broke her heart and inspired her soul. He spoke about her dream of doing more, helping more, reaching more people in need. Margaret always said that we don't get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to choose what we do about it. Dad said, when she died, I had a choice. I could have retreated into grief, sold a house, moved into some sterile condo, and lived out my days in lonely comfort. Or I could have turned that grief into something purposeful, something that would honor her life by continuing her work. He paused, looking out at the crowd. I'm so grateful I made the choice I did. Because of that choice, hundreds of families have been helped. Thousands of lives have been touched. And Margaret's love continues to spread, ripple after ripple, generation after generation. After the service, families lined up to thank Dad, to hug him, to tell him what the Foundation meant to them. He greeted each one with genuine warmth, remembering names and details, asking about kids and jobs and dreams. Watching him, I realized that this was his joy now. Not the praise or the recognition, but the connection, the knowledge that he'd made a difference, that he'd taken his grief and transformed it into grace. As the sun set that evening, casting golden light across Mom's garden, Dad and I sat on the porch with Rachel and Maggie. The four of us, 3 generations, united by love and purpose and the legacy of a woman who believed in the power of compassion. Grandpa, Maggie said, climbing into his lap, tell me a story about Grandma Margaret. Dad smiled, wrapping his arms around her. Well, sweetheart, when your grandma was young, she had a dream. She dreamed of a world where everyone had a home, where no child went to bed scared or hungry, where every person knew they mattered. Did her dream come true? Maggie asked. It's coming true, Dad said. Slowly, one family at a time, one act of kindness at a time. Her dream is coming true. And you know what? You're part of making it come true. Every time you're kind, every time you help someone, you're making Grandma's dream a little more real. Maggie thought about that, then said, I'm going to make her dream come true, Grandpa. I promise. Dad's eyes filled with tears. I know you will, sweetheart. I know you will. That night, after we'd said our goodbyes and driven home, I thought about promises. About the promise I'd made to Mom to take care of Dad. About the promise Dad had made to Mom to carry forward her work. About the promise I was making to both of them to ensure the Foundation continued. About the promise little Maggie had made to keep the dream alive. These promises weren't burdens. They were gifts. The gift of purpose. The gift of meaning. The gift of knowing that our lives matter, because we choose to make them matter by serving others. Sophie had wanted to turn the house into money. Dad turned it into meaning. Sophie had seen a transaction. Dad saw a transformation. Sophie had calculated value. Dad created values. And in doing so, he taught me the most important lesson of my life, that what we leave behind isn't determined by what we own, but by what we give away. The foundation is now part of my daily life. I serve on the board, help with fundraising, volunteer regularly, and increasingly take on leadership responsibilities as Dad gradually steps back. It's not just my job or my obligation. It's my calling, my purpose, my way of honoring the two people who taught me everything important about how to live a meaningful life. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine what would have happened if I'd sided with Sophie that day. If I'd pressured Dad to sell the house. If he'd given in. If we'd split the money and gone our separate ways. The Margaret Pierce Foundation wouldn't exist. 300 families wouldn't have gotten the help they needed. The ripple effects of compassion and dignity wouldn't be spreading through communities. And I'd probably be divorced from Sophie by now, wondering why I felt so empty despite having money in the bank. But that's not what happened. Because Dad had the wisdom to see what really mattered. Because he had the patience to let me find my own way. Because he had the courage to choose purpose over profit. And because Mom's legacy was too powerful to be reduced to a real estate transaction. Dad is 82 now. He moves more slowly, needs more rest, speaks more softly. But when he talked about the foundation, when he meets families we've helped, when he holds little Maggie and tells her stories about her grandmother, his eyes light up with fire that age can't diminish. This is what keeps him going. This is what gives his days meaning. This is his gift to Mom, to me, to everyone who will come after us. And I'm so grateful. Grateful that I woke up in time to see Sophie's true nature. Grateful that Dad showed me a better way. Grateful that I get to be part of this legacy, this ongoing story of love and action. Grateful that my daughter will grow up understanding that the best inheritance isn't money, but values. That the most important success isn't measured in dollars, but in lives touched. This is my father's story. This is my story. This is our family story. And it's still being written one family at a time, one second chance at a time, one act of compassion at a time. Dad is still here at 82, still watching over Mom's legacy, still ensuring that her dream continues to grow and flourish and touch lives in ways we're still discovering. The house still stands, full of memories and meaning. The foundation still grows, helping families who need it most. And the garden still blooms every spring, yellow tulips reaching toward the sun, planted by a woman who believed in second chances and nurtured by a man who turned grief into grace. Mom knew that love isn't about holding on. It's about passing something forward. Dad lived it. And now it's my turn to carry it forward, to teach my daughter, to ensure that the ripples keep spreading generation after generation, proving that the most powerful legacy we can leave is love and action. That's the story I wanted to tell. That's the lesson I needed to learn. And that's the inheritance that truly matters. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. And if this is your first time watching my video, please subscribe to my channel so that you get notified whenever I post a story.